There is a certain part of me that still struggles to process the fact that Final Fantasy VII is 27 years old. That game was originally launched in 1997 for the PlayStation and is a title attributed as the origin point of a lot of players' Final Fantasy fandom. It's no surprise then that its from the ground up remake, released in April of 2020, was a success and is deserving of praise. This game, that game's sequel and story continuation, entitled Rebirth, released on the 29th of February 2024 as a PlayStation 5 exclusive. Let me open by saying this game is one of the most content-filled non-MMORPGs that I've ever played, and quite frankly, is an absolute monster of a game. A single playthrough in which I did a large portion of, but not all, the side content, ran up a playtime in excess of 70 hours. Perhaps understandably then, Rebirth requires in the range of 150 gigabytes of space on your PlayStation 5 hard drive. This is designed to be a massive adventure, underwritten by a heavily cinematic narrative, and it certainly achieves that goal. As this story is such a key component, the game gives you a quick refresher in the main menu, covering an abridged rundown of the events of Remake. The short version is that Cloud, our blonde protagonist, joins a group of eco-terrorists as a mercenary to fight an evil megacorporation that he used to be employed by, all the while being haunted by visions of a legendary hero who is trying to end the world. The entire first game took place in the city of Midgar, and this adventure picks up in the small village of Calm just outside. The team are now aware of the whispers who rule over fate, and we begin with Cloud recapping how he knows Sephiroth. The tale that unfolds from this takes the party on a winding journey to different towns and villages, following robed individuals who have some mysterious connection to our silver-haired antagonist. I won't be spoiling any late game twists, but there are significant tweaks made to the original Final Fantasy VII plot, so whether you're a veteran or a new player, this adventure will feel new to you. What's so compelling about this tale is that the narrative is strongly supported by the way that it is presented to the player, specifically in regards to cinematography. There's a variety of camera angles, camera movement, and close-ups at relevant times, and all of this is supported by a wide array of animations for all party members. The true success of the recent Final Fantasy games has been in this same cinematic nature. The series has always had strong sound and music design, along with excellent writing, but 3 of the more recent games, specifically standalone ones like Remake, Final Fantasy XVI, and Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, are all on a different level when it comes to their delivery and spectacle of the narrative. Of course, no story like this would be complete without interesting characters, and there is an entire party full of them here. Rebirth assumes a certain level of prior knowledge, as the game immediately begins developing characters rather than introducing them. I can certainly see an argument that Rebirth takes for granted that most players have played Remake. The actual development that occurs here is strong, and each side quest pulls one of Cloud's companions to the fore for some bonus dialogue and a bit of character building. Someone on the development team clearly had a strong and clear vision for who each of these characters is, and where they needed to be emotionally at certain points throughout this adventure. Everybody has their own little contradictions, but they're all highly believable entities. As an example of this, let's look at the character who I felt was the best developed throughout. Barrett Wallace has a gun for an arm and is undersold if I describe him as well-built. The personality of his we see primarily is the brash leader who has his hot-headed moments.
The news outlets are nothing but Shinra mouthpieces spewing propaganda.
This was the game that really dug into Barrett's softer side, as he deals with facing up to his biggest regret in life and revisits his hometown, where we learn the source of his anger at Shinra. They're the previously aforementioned evil megacorporation. There's a specific moment during an early side quest where the team escort a dog that's carrying money to the son of the quest giver. Throughout the journey, Cloud and his team comment that this is just a mother doing what she can for her son, and discuss the pros and cons of letting your children make their own mistakes, or trying to shield them from the horrors of the world. This leads the gang's only parent, Barrett, to comment on his own relationship with his daughter Marlene.
Oh yeah.
And that's what scares me. As much as I want to let her fly, I don't know if I'll be able to let go when the time comes. Maybe I'll panic, get in her way, hold her down, all to keep her safe. Oh, Marlene, I wish you could be my baby girl forever.
Even though the primary intention of this dialogue is to be comical at Barrett's expense, there's this undercurrent of truth in everything they're saying. Barrett is going to be an overprotective father, no matter what he says, because that's just who he is. The fact that we as players can see that much about Barrett, a literal collection of pixels, really hits home how well this entire adventure is presented. Final Fantasy VII Rebirth makes Barrett's very nature feel organic and real, and he is just one character. Believe me when I say that the others are presented just as well. While it's these little moments that catch you off guard, this is the game that does a better job with its pacing, and that's one of the key areas I critiqued Final Fantasy XVI in. The lulls are less harsh and feel more deliberate, designed for the purpose of breaking up the narrative. A good example of this is around a third of the way through the game, where you end up at the Costa del Sol beach resort. This coincides with Yuffie's character becoming more prevalent in the story, and she's injected to the game to provide a large chunk of the comic relief. A quick note on Yuffie herself though, as while I like the energy her character brings, she is relied on very heavily to be the levity and comedy in this story. Her entire personality feels like it's been constructed to be the punchline of a series of recurring jokes. This is laid on a bit thick for my liking, and there were times when I thought the main narrative would take itself more seriously than it does. Rebirth also introduces the element of choice and party relationships in a slightly different manner to the original remake. You can now see a visual cue as to how much each of these characters thinks of Cloud, with the more obvious smiley face, the better. There are certain moments where you can make choices to influence these too, such as when speaking to your companions within the towns and cities you visit. These are particularly noteworthy for their character building utility, and affect which party member appears at certain date moments in the Gold Saucer. Speaking of the Gold Saucer, let's talk locations and world. Final Fantasy VII Rebirth is utterly massive, with it fair to say that the map is broken up into distinct areas, each of which are very open in their own way. Rebirth introduces a series of open world mechanics, along with new methods of traversal, to help cover the distances you have to trek now that Cloud & Co. have left the confines of the city. This was a part of the game that got off to a rocky start, and I mean that both literally and metaphorically. Where you really begin the game just outside of Calm, there is a moor littered with small hills and protrusions. It looks like rural highland countryside, and is similarly difficult to navigate. While the appearance of this area is relatively realistic, the additional verticality makes traversal difficult. This game is not as free-flowing as it looks, and there are often a lot of points where you can't climb up or jump down as you'd perhaps like to. There's a lot of going around and trying to find the way that the game intended for you to navigate the area. In all honesty, throughout this early section, I had my misgivings about this system. This gets both better and worse when you get access to a chocobo, as you can now get around faster, but when you run afoul of a piece of geometry, you notice it even more so. This really did take some figuring out, and ultimately, it's just an unfortunate opening setting. The desert later on and the winding waterways of Nibble are much better, and show off a lot of this game's best traversal choices, with some unique chocobos and a few mechanical surprises to help you get from A to B. As you explore each of these areas, there are a plethora of side objectives, which fall into the category of collecting intel. These are mostly optional and are presented in a way that left me drawing similarities with Ubisoft's recent style of open world game, with a lot of the content being driven by towers and map markers. There is definitely an element of box checking to this, but it never felt oppressive in a way that diminishes the activities that you do. Each area has its own chocobo or method of faster transport, and you unlock the ability to fast travel relatively quickly. There is no need to run around on foot to each location other than on your initial exploration, and that really does mean that these activities are optional. While you're out exploring, you do run into monsters and other combat encounters, which range from small, insignificant ones to placed quest objectives and optional bosses. These can be used to grind for XP, AP, or materials, and these are the primary avenues of progression in the game. As you play, your party levels up. Experience can be gained through combat and traditional grinding, or by completing side quests. This increases your maximum health and other base stats, including MP. Your stats can be further augmented by the gear you equip, with each character limited to one weapon, one bracelet or bangle, and an accessory. This is very vanilla in terms of gear progression, but is supplemented strongly by the materia system. Final Fantasy VII stands out in a franchise that really has had some interesting ones, like the Gambit system and the Sphere Grid. The materia system itself is so incredibly simple in concept, but it's incredibly useful in turn. Weapons and bangles have slots, in which you can slot materia. These orbs come in various kinds, such as ones that give characters access to certain spells and abilities. Throughout the game, you gain AP for each equipped materia, and when this reaches a certain level, the materia itself levels up. You can then access a better version of the ability that materia provides. Because each of these orbs is its own entity, and these can be freely equipped, it's very easy to change your mind about a character. I played a lot of the game with a party of Cloud, Aerith and Red, but towards the end I really wanted to swap in for Tifa's bonus stagger damage. I just unequipped Red's leveled up materia and put those on Tifa, and she was good to go. This provides the excellent versatility that makes this system good, because when the game forces you to play as specific characters, which it does do throughout the story, it doesn't matter much if you've ignored that character for the entire game, as you can use this to make them very powerful. In Rebirth, this system is used alongside the SP system, which is a grid featuring unlockable skills. Unlocking these provides access to passive buffs and synergy abilities, which are a type of combo attack. These become available when two party members in the frontline team fill up a gauge by using their ATB abilities. Another new system for Rebirth is the item transmutation mechanic. Drops gained from battle and materials gathered in the world can now be used to create useful items, including consumables like potions and powerful equipables. Throughout my time with the game, I went back and forth on this system, and ultimately feel it lands with mixed results. In all honesty, this is because it's not that useful outside of min-maxing. The game gives you enough of these consumable items throughout the game anyway, and Gil isn't that difficult to come by. You can always buy the high potions and antidotes you need from vending machines that are frequent throughout the world. The main positive about this system is that you can unlock some rare blueprints via completionist activities in the overworld. These often allow you to make items that you can't buy in the shops. This system was an interesting decision, but not one that really moves the needle of the game either way. It's just there, and outside of a few quest items is entirely optional. As is a lot of the actual combat too. You have to fight at certain story points, but as you're exploring the world and environments, you really can dodge a lot of combat. When you do end up in battle, you control one of 3 party members that are in the frontline team. Even though you have to move around as Cloud, you can set this so that as soon as you enter battle, control switches to another character. This transition is handled better than other games that have done this previously, but it would have been nice to be able to explore as your chosen party member too. Story continuity could have been maintained by making Cloud someone you can't remove from the frontline team. As the animations for most characters are already in the game, I do think this is an extra step that should have been applied here anyway. Combat is action oriented and lets you merge regular attacks with each character's special abilities. You can also access the command menu, which slows the game down to what feels like 5% of the normal speed, and allows you to select abilities like a turn-based game. This requires an ATB charge, which is gained by performing actions like attacking, blocking, and parrying. This system has had a minimal number of changes from Remake, but melee characters now have better options for attacking at range, something that was a real issue when fighting flying enemies in the first game. Each character plays slightly differently, and Yuffie and Kate have new combat mechanics when they join up too. Yuffie can throw her weapon and use her ninjutsu powers, while Kate can call his Moogle companion to draw attention. Combat is also helped by some of the enemy design, which gives the majority of the entities you fight elemental weaknesses that you're supposed to exploit to deal big damage. This is an important mechanic, because there are times when the regular attacks you're throwing at your foes feel weak and ineffective, but exploiting a weakness and pressuring enemies forces them into a stagger state, which gives you a window to make up the damage. Combat is fluid, and while the boss fights can drag on a little bit if you're not able to find their weakness, there's not much to fault with it, outside of a few annoying enemy abilities and flying monsters. Looking at the game in its entirety, I can't see too many glaring weaknesses. It has its moment-to-moment failings, like the temperamental traversal, and there's certainly a bit of trying to do too much in the final moments of the plot. This leaves things unnecessarily complicated to try and unpick. But the big picture takeaway is that the game is at least as good as it is large. The true flaws are certainly those of a technical nature. The most noticeable one throughout is how aggressively this game scales down detail. This game has a fidelity mode at 30 FPS and a performance mode at 60 FPS. Even though this game's combat is a bit of a hybrid and playable at 30, I chose to have the extra frames and lost some graphical quality. However, the way this is implemented is poor. This is most noticeable when looking at some of the in-engine graphics that are only lightly animated. The game's motion blur combines with downscaling to create some really out-of-place textures at times. This is all the more noticeable because it harshly contrasts with the other elements of this game, where the detail is excellent. This further adds to my annoyance, because sometimes the game can't make its mind up. Is it going all in on detail, or is it leaving some things behind? This stretches to missing things, like there being no water effect on our party's clothes when they dive into streams, and there being no footprints in the mud as they walk. You're just never sure where this game's going to go all in graphically, but for the moments where it does, it really does up the game. This erratic detail stretches to lighting too. Most of this throughout is fine, but in transitioning into dark caves or walkways, the switch to additional brightness is much slower than it needs to be. It can mean you're wandering around blind as this lingers on screen. I do want to say, I would rather deal with all of this than the type of issue which makes this game a stuttering and crashing mess, which it was not. I am, however, curious to see how this would look and run on decent PC hardware that far exceeds the PS5. Rebirth did make good use of the PS5's haptic triggers and motion sensors. There's just a lot in the game where you use these features, and how well it's implemented is a bit scattergun. As I bring this monologue to a close, I do want to take a moment to praise this game's minigames. At front and centre is the card game Queen's Blood. This is deceptively difficult and was a strong recurring activity within the game's story. This is likely to resonate with players in the same manner that Triple Triad or The Witcher's Gwent did, and that's high praise. There's also the reimagined Fort Condor and a Gambit-based robot minigame. There's also the games in Costa del Sol, from the Rocket League-inspired Wild Run to the Pirate Shooting Gallery. And who can forget Junon's Military March, that takes the mechanics from Remake's Honeybee Dance and moves it on to a whole new level. There's also Chocobo Racing, which is a fraction of this game's content, but is on a whole different level of quality to the ill-fated Switch game Chocobo GP. This game even went as far as to put a playable piano in almost every major location, and you can play some iconic Final Fantasy tunes, or freestyle if you've got that kind of talent. Finally, this game also dishes out fan service in healthy doses, and gives you a few opportunities to dress Tifa and Aerith up in beachwear. I've got my opinions about this, but people have been sexualizing Tifa since she looked like this, so I can't say I'm remotely surprised. Let's wrap things up. There aren't many RPGs that have the production value this game has. Final Fantasy VII Remake and Rebirth are two games that you can point out to your friends who still believe this series is defined by turn-based battles and tedious grinding. This is part of a storytelling masterpiece, and while the moment-to-moment combat and open-world activities might not be for everyone, the progression and RPG systems are rock solid, the characters are lovable as hell, and the story about saving the planet from a big megacorporation trying to milk it dry is even more relatable to audiences in 2024 than it was in '97. This is a game that should be peaking right now, and has been expertly designed to feel new and special to people who played the original, and to those that weren't born until over a decade later. There's a very good game here, and it's got its flaws and unique quirks that will raise eyebrows, not least because it's only 1/3 of a full story, and at times, it can't shake that feeling. Rebirth is one of the better contemporary RPGs, but lands very similarly to Final Fantasy XVI. where it's just very, very good. Not quite irrefutable excellence.